Hey, we're heading to Jerusalem again today, and we're going to talk about grace. It's a great topic, a great story, and I hope you stick with us as we discover the man healed by Jesus. Stay tuned. Shalom once again. Thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to have you with us for yet another teaching about context. In fact, Biblical Israel Ministries and Tours is all about teaching Bible stories in the context of this playing board. In fact, I'm excited to announce to you for the first time that I'm actually through the first draft of a book where we're going to share 50 particular stories from the Bible and sort of set them in the context of the playing board, the map of Israel, including all of these cities mentioned in the stories, and that, of course, includes our story today, Jerusalem. We're going to talk about the man who was healed by Jesus at the Pools of Bethesda, the house of mercy. It's a great story, and we're so honored that you're here with us to learn with us about how the story unfolded in the context of the city of Jerusalem. Before we get to our story, make sure that you like this video. We would really appreciate that. And also hit the bell and subscribe to us. And certainly that way you can be informed of all of our upcoming teaching as we continue to expand teaching the Bible in the context of the land. So let's now get right to our story from John 5. Once again, we fly into the land of Israel, and specifically, our story will take us to Jerusalem. And it's always an exciting adventure when we connect Jerusalem to the life of Jesus. So this is the land of Israel, bordered by the Mediterranean on the west, the country of Jordan to the east. That includes the Jordan River and the Dead Sea. Our story from John 5 will engage us in how Jesus healed the lame man from his illness at the Pools of Bethesda. So here is Jerusalem. We talk about the hill country of Judah. Jerusalem is about 18 miles due west of the Dead Sea. When we fly over the old city of Jerusalem, just know that the old city walls that were built in by the Ottoman emperor named Suleiman the Great in 1537 do not necessarily offer us the size of Jerusalem in the days of Jesus. But these walls that date 480 some years now define the old city walls. They are 2.8 miles in circumference. However, within the old city today, the Pools of Bethesda can be located here on the north side or the north end of the Temple Mount and what was the Antonia Fortress right here. So today we're heading inside the walls of the Turkish old city to the Pools of Bethesda. Once again, from the south here, we can see the walls. Again, they date to 1537 to about 1544. But here, once again, the circle represents the location of Bethesda. Don't confuse that with the city in the Galilee called Bethsaida, where 3 of the disciples of Jesus were from. This model, done by the Archaeology Illustrated, friends of ours, illustrates where the pool was. Here we're looking from the west to the east, and most likely this represents the pools of Bethesda. You can see the Mount of Olives to the east, or on the other side of the Kidron Valley, and of course the Judean desert further east, and the Dead Sea about 18 miles away. We're not sure if this wall, in fact we're pretty sure it did not go in this direction, which means the Pool of Bethesda was inside the city in the days of Jesus. It was most likely outside the city, but this model does represent that. It doesn't really matter or play a factor in our story from John 5. So here is the Temple Mount. This particular model has the pools outside the city, in contrast to our last model. The wall probably went from the Antonia Fortress in this manner, heading directly westward to the palace of Herod the Great. In fact, Josephus, the Jewish historian, mentions that this second wall, as he defined it, went in this direction. And that means that most likely this area, including where the pools were outside the city. Keep in mind that the proximity with the temple was very close, just to the south of the pools. As we're going to see in our story, Jesus actually finds the healed paralytic or lame man in the temple courts, most likely here in front of the Golden Gate. So this model represents the location of the pool and the location of the walls. So we disregard the green area and this third wall that was not built until King Agrippa from 41 AD to 44 AD. Again, it does not have a real strong bearing or factor in our story, but just know that we're talking about this area that was outside the walls. When we go to the Israel Museum, we see this particular third wall, so please take this out of your mind or don't picture it being here, because it most likely wasn't. Only the Antonia Fortress was, and this second wall. Here's a great model of these pools. This is where Jesus will do his healing. Here from the west, just to understand the temple a little better, this is the whole western wall. This served as one of the 4 retaining walls built by Herod the Great so that he could expand his platform to a surface area of about 35 acres. The royal stoa on the south end, the steps leading into the temple for commoners, and yet these entrances here in the west, this archway for dignitaries, and this bridge, if you will, called Wilson's Arch today because of the archaeological discovery of arches here. Most likely this was how the priests entered the temple. This particular archway, or at least the remnants of it, was found by Edward Robinson in 1838, hence it's called today Robinson's Arch. But just to the north of the temple, and again, if I go back to this slide, this would be off to the left of this picture, is where the Pool of Bethesda was. Now, on the same grounds today is a Crusader church. It's called St. Anne's Church. It was built in 1131. Has really nothing to do with the story from John 5. But just a short 40 yards away are the Pools of Bethesda. This looks like a complicated archaeological mess, and it perhaps could be categorized like that because we see a bunch of different layers, one on top of the other. You can see Crusader structures. This means probably 12th century AD ruins built on Byzantine ruins, which are 4th, 5th, 6th century AD, but the lower level does date to the time of Jesus, including these steps here, and we see them in full color here. So all of this now has been filled with either later structures built by people in later time periods, or now, of course, just natural fill. These pools were probably fed by a spring or a collection of water contained in a dam on the other side of that wall. But here, as illustrated, Jesus befriends a man who came here because he wanted healing. Now, in the Greek and the Roman way of understanding how healing took place, Asclepion was the name of the god, Asclepios, another form of it. He was the god of healing. And even, I would believe, Gentiles were here hoping to find healing themselves in the water that was stirred. So a lot of religious belief and even pagan belief surfaced here in this area of the pool. But even Jews came here hoping to be healed when the water was stirred. This is how the story unfolds. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda. It means house of mercy, by the way, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. Some manuscripts also include this, and they waited for the moving of the waters. From time to time an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters, the first one into the pool. After each such disturbance would be cured of whatever disease they had. It is believed, by the way, archaeologically, that this wall that dammed up water on the other side was built with various stone, some of it more porous than others. Perhaps when the water seeped through the more porous stones, perhaps, for instance, after a heavy rain, when water gathered on the other side of the wall, that seemed to be a sign that the water was being stirred by the gods, Asclepius, or in the Jewish belief, a sign of healing to occur. Verse 5, we continue the story. One who had been there was an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked, and the day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. So Jesus extends friendship to the man, and the man goes down the steps, no doubt with help. He submerges himself in the water, and he is healed. Jesus again healed on the Sabbath. Now there were two schools of thought, two schools of theology, if you will, that permitted such an activity of healing, one especially more than the other. In what is called the school or the house of Shammai, who was a rabbi, who lived about 80 years up through about 30 A.D., he was a little more strict and conservative in what you could and could not do on the Sabbath. For those educated within the house of Shammai, what Jesus did was not allowed. But in the school of Hillel, who was a rabbi, who lived prior to Shammai, he was a little more generous than Shammai was. I think Jesus identified with Hillel more than Shammai. In the views of this particular rabbi, you could certainly do certain things on the Sabbath, especially if it meant to rescue someone with a renewed life, with healing, and especially if it saved a person from death. Jesus performs this miracle in good faith, and even though it happened on the Shabbat or the Sabbath, this man is healed. And Jesus rescues his life, if you will, physically. But I believe also Jesus touched this man spiritually. Now, archaeologically, we can still see, not these particular steps, but down here below in the dark, what's left of the Pool of Bethesda. And you can see some of the lower areas of the pool. These are some areas that are not visible today, but we can still see the lower levels that date to the time when this story took place. What's left of this place dedicated to Asclepion or Asclepios again tells us that there was also, probably at the same time, a belief here at this pool that when the waters stirred, people could obtain healing. But Jesus encounters this man back in the temple, most likely in front of this gate called the Golden Gate, most likely the eastern gate of the temple. And Jesus says, "Stop sinning, or something worse will happen to you." Jesus displays compassion, but he also shares grace, telling this man, don't sin. Enjoy your healed life. And I believe in this act of healing, this man came to an understanding of who Jesus was as the Messiah. And I'm hopeful that he also was healed spiritually as he realized that Jesus was here to do more than simply heal physically, but he came to heal hearts from sin. Another story that happens here in Israel, and specifically in Jerusalem. We walk in the footsteps of Jesus and appreciate his healing touch. So can you picture this lame man? He's been paralyzed for so many decades, and yet Jesus once again befriends him. In this place known to be a place of healing, people gathered all over from not only Judea, but maybe even the Galilee, but certainly these Jerusalemites who were looking for a change in their life. And that's exactly what Jesus did. He changed this man's life. He healed him, and he befriended him with grace. That's exactly who Jesus is. And he still is in the business of doing the same thing for us. That's the great thing about the Bible, you know. We can read all these stories from either the Old or, in this case, the New Testament, and yet we can apply these stories. Because just as Jesus did healings back then, I think what's more important is that he still is in the business of spiritually healing us. Now, this man, I know Jesus says, sin no more or else something else worse will happen to you. So this man probably needed a touch of grace in both respects. Not only his body needed to be touched and healed by Jesus, but I think his heart did too. And my guess is that as an outcast, as probably someone who was maybe helped into the temple, at least the outer courts where he probably sat and begged, just like other people did in those days. But here, this man needed a friend, and Jesus offers that. And I have to think and believe that this man was also touched in his heart. Someone actually cared enough for him to not only befriend him, but also to heal him. So I hope you enjoyed our story in Jerusalem from John 5, a great story once again. And I'm sure in future teachings we'll return to Jerusalem again to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. So until next time, thanks so much for joining us, and shalom.